There is a place in the world where writing, laws, cities, and also the most devastating wars of the 21st century were born. A territory where wise men, prophets, and dictators lived together, where glory and destruction have walked hand in hand for more than 5,000 years. Today we know that territory as Iraq, but its history goes far beyond oil, bombs, and news headlines. How did it go from being the cradle of civilization to becoming the epicenter of global chaos? The answer lies in its history. Trust me, it's not the one they told you. Join me on this journey to understand the complexity of one of the most fascinating and misunderstood countries on the planet. Today is a very special day. This video is very special because we will be taking a journey through the history of this country from the discoveries thousands of years before Christ, which were vital for the evolution of humanity as we know it today, up to the most recent history full of catastrophes, wars, and chaos, which also leave us with many lessons about how we should not be in this life. And we're going to start it at the last standing monument of Saddam Hussein. Because today, in the year 2025, it's written in the law, and it's completely forbidden to show any kind of worship, tribute, or homage to this man who did so much harm to this country. This is the only monument they haven't torn down, solely with the intention of making sure that the dark past this country lived through is always remembered, so it won't be repeated. They love it just like security guards and the police. They love to pose for photos and smile. Salam alaikum. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go back about 4,000 years before Christ with the Sumerians, the first recorded civilization in Mesopotamia in the lands that are now Iraq. In ancient times and for almost 2,000 years, these lands were inhabited by these people who were very, very intelligent. In fact, they are also credited with the invention of cuneiform writing. So here in this very country, what was Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago, if we look at it from today? It was not only where writing was invented, but they also invented the code of laws, temple architectures, and astronomy. They were absolute geniuses. Then the Akkadians arrived from the year 2334 before Christ until the year 2154. These were quite well known for having the first structured government with governors and a bureaucracy to be able to rule the territories. In fact, it is said that they were also the first conquerors of the world. And then, by the year 1894 before Christ, the Babylonians arrived. And for where this archaeological visit we're doing today takes on quite a bit of relevance. And this one you see here is the Ishtar Gate and one of the main entrances to the city of Babylon. It is one of the most impressive structures of the ancient world. And although it was built around the year 575 before Christ, that is, almost 1,300 years after this civilization settled here in Mesopotamia, it has monumental architecture. And in this way, we officially enter the Ishtar Gates, which was not only the physical entrance to Babylon, but also a symbolic one. Because it was like a city full of progress, laws, architecture, and modernization for its time. And how interesting it is to be able to explore The remains obviously reconstructed and restored, but here there was one of the most intelligent civilizations in the history of humanity. There are two people from the Babylonian Empire we have to remember. The first is Hammurabi. Around the year 1700 before Christ, he was credited with creating the first code of laws. After several conquests, the Babylonian Empire rose again, and around the year 600 before Christ, there was an emperor named Nebuchadnezzar or something like that. The second one, not the first, but the second, Nebuchadnezzar the second, and he was the one who ordered the construction of the Hanging Gardens, which are a bit controversial because they are one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. But there's no solid proof that they were actually built, so they're still debated among historians. Hello, my friend, thank you. And if you're wondering why exactly here in Iraq, where you're standing, was it where this whole empire, these civilizations were built? And that's because this country is between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Here we see one, and the other would be up above, which you can't see in this image. And obviously the surrounding soils were very, very fertile. Once we pass that replica of the Ishtar Gate, which is the entrance to this archaeological site, we arrive at what was the palace of Nebuchadnezzar. And there's a part that's almost like a quarter down, which is original. I mean, it's 2,700 years old. And then the upper part was finished later. But the craziest thing is that you can see that arch and compare it with the image that was being shown to us. The guide showed us how this place was found. Only that once again, during the period of Saddam Hussein, he ordered almost this entire structure to be buried and then to build the upper part. Why? Honestly, there isn't a certain theory, but our guide is telling us that it's for political reasons. What kind of political reasons? I don't know, but it's impressive that at least, well, we have access to see all that lower part today, 2,700 years after it was created. Among many things, you know that the British are known for having the largest number of archaeological pieces from Egypt. But I was told today that the country they have the most pieces from is Iraq. I don't know if any of those watching this video can confirm or deny this. But it's said that in museums in the United Kingdom, well, there are pieces from Iraq, Iran, and Egypt to an incredible extent. What you see here is one of the most impressive things we'll see on our tour today. And I'll explain why in a moment. These empires were built in layers, meaning that the more recent the empire, the city was built on top of the previous one. What we see back here is part of the original Ishtar Gate, but not the one you might think belonged to the empire of Nebuchadnezzar. No, but from the empire of Hammurabi, that is almost 4,000 years before Christ. And why? Because the Germans, who were the ones who discovered this, took everything from this last empire. The bricks were blue, like those visible at the entrance of this archaeological site. And they, well, took everything to make a museum over there in Germany. However, they kept digging and found the remains of the first Ishtar Gate. It's also said that beneath all of this are remains of the Sumerian civilization that is 6,000 years ago, but they haven't wanted to keep digging because there's water and they could end up destroying everything that's there today. What we see here are remains of the first writing system invented by humanity, which is called cuneiform. And yes, many might think it's the hieroglyphs in Egypt, but the truth is, no, it was the Sumerians, as I mentioned at the beginning. What you just saw is 2,700 years old, that is 600 years before Christ. But that writing has been recorded for 6,000 years, and many pieces of evidence have been found. In fact, they tell us that here in Iraq, there are more than 15,000 archaeological sites where they have been found. Well, not only cuneiform writings, but also architecture from that era and buildings that blow our minds and make us ask, how was that built back then? But anyway, I don't want to keep getting too intense with the ancient history of this country, so I'm going to summarize a bit for you. Since the fall of the Babylonian Empire, they were conquered by the Persians. Then the Greeks came. In fact, Alexander the Great died here. And then the Persians came back again until around the year 700 and something after Christ, when the Arabs united and returned to this territory, overthrowing the Persians. And if you're wondering, what was it that united the Arabs who were scattered throughout the region and formed that army that would later overthrow the Persians? It was Islam. Muhammad, who was the last prophet of this religion, departed from Mecca to Medina on July 16th of the year 622, and that same day is considered the first day of the Islamic calendar. Today, we would be in the year 1403 approximately. In fact, in countries like Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia, that is the date used in official government documents. And since the year 762, Baghdad became the capital of the Caliphate, Abbasid. If you're wondering, what is a caliphate? Basically, it's a system of government where the caliph, who would be like the president, is a political and religious successor of the Prophet Muhammad, or, well, in Spanish, Mahoma. Until the year 1258, Iraq experienced almost 500 years of what is known as the Islamic Golden Age, which was characterized by innovation, by all kinds of scientific studies, mathematics, philosophy, astronomy. Until in the year 1258, the Mongols invaded Baghdad and destroyed everything. There, about 4 centuries went by, during which it was under the control of different empires, wars, and a lot of instability. But in the 16th century, it became part of the Ottoman Empire, where it would find a certain stability, in quotes, until the 20th century. And with the fall of the Ottoman Empire in World War I, Iraq became a British mandate until 1932, when it gained its independence. However, they would be heavily influenced by what is today the United Kingdom. In fact, the banknotes of this country were produced in the United Kingdom until around 1990. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because that palace you see in the background is very important in the history of this country. For almost 4 decades, the country suffered many coups, political instability, and changes of government. Until 1968, when the Ba'ath Party came to power, and one of its most influential figures was Saddam Hussein. But it wasn't until 1979 that this dictator came to power. And that palace you see behind me, he ordered it to be built in 1995 with his airs of superiority. He said, "Look, I want a palace in front of the archaeological zone of Babylon," because he felt he had the same historical importance for this country as everything I've been telling you in this video. As we were leaving this archaeological site, we found these stamped bricks on the wall, which were commissioned by Saddam Hussein with the intention of representing cuneiform writing. But they are written in Arabic as a way to leave his legacy in the history of this country and, well, to believe that he was on par with the great discoveries that took place since Mesopotamia. A fun fact before we continue with the history of this country. Right now, I'm actually in the central part of the palace of ancient Babylon, where Alexander the Great died. Then they tried to move his remains to Alexandria, and they got lost along the way. In fact, there are multiple excavations trying to find them, and they still haven't succeeded. They just told us that a series came out on Netflix a couple of months ago. Talking a bit about this whole story, you can go watch it, and that's it. We'll be back soon with the story of Iraq. And just a year after Saddam took power, in 1981, of the bloodiest wars began of the century against Iran over territorial disputes about some rivers near the border because he claimed they were strategic areas. The fact is that 8 years later, after that war, there was no winner. Neither of the two countries took territory from the other, but what there was a lot of human loss. It is estimated that 1,200,000 people lost their lives in this conflict, about 500,000 here in Iraq, and about 700,000 in Iran. All for nothing. And as if that weren't enough, in 1988, almost at the end of the war with Iran, Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons in the town of Al-Abya, a town in the north of this same country, because it had been taken by the Iranians. And regardless of whether there were women, children, or even men who had nothing to do with the war, he dropped those bombs in retaliation, also because it was a Kurdish town. The Kurds are a different ethnic group who don't even speak Arabic and also live Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. Details in another video. The fact is that this attack with mustard gas, cyanide, and other chemicals cost the lives of more than 6,000 innocent people. And the last straw during the period of this psychopath was starting a war with Kuwait. He tried to invade it because he didn't just want to take over this country, but the entire Gulf, but starting here. The craziest thing is that Kuwait had supported him with resources for the war with Iran. The palace I mentioned a little while ago that Saddam Hussein ordered to be built in 1995 is exactly where we are right now. In fact, he built it on a hill because of what I mentioned about new civilizations building on top of the old ones, because he wanted to be higher than everything else. And what you see here is the panoramic view that goes all around the place. Luckily, we got a special permit to go in and film it. And we're about to show you a little bit of what's inside here. I honestly can't believe I'm inside one of Saddam Hussein's abandoned palaces, recording a video for the channel for you guys. Look, this place is insane. Honestly, I think it's not allowed to go up these stairs, but Tom told me, let's do it. And let's do it. Everything is too dark. I imagine it's because they're afraid the structure might collapse or something like that. Although I also imagine that they built this super well. It's crazy to be here. I'm going to keep going up to see what I find. Even though I know there's nothing wrong, it's super creepy. I mean, the vibe in this place gets eerie. No, I'm definitely not going up there again. Look, it's like you get there, I'll take a quick peek, but I'm definitely not going in there. Okay, here are some other stairs. Wow, wow, wow. Look at this, wow. That's crazy. And the view I had from this, which is the highest dome in this palace, is insane. On the edge of the river and with millions of date palms, which, by the way, Iraq claims to have the largest number of date palms in the world. In the background, you can see a few. And as if we hadn't done enough crazy things so far, we're going to climb some other stairs over there, half collapsed, to reach the very top of this palace. How impressive. Here he had his grill at the very top of the palace, with some breathtaking views. That intense tour inside the palace is over. It was even hard to tell which were the bedrooms and which were the living rooms, because every space was so big. The space lacks furniture, causing confusion. If it weren't for things like the ductwork that could be for a bathroom, you wouldn't even guess which room was which or which living room was which. Continuing with the story of Saddam Hussein, after he decided to invade Kuwait in 1991, the United States, along with an international coalition, decided to intervene to drive him out of that country. And not only that, but also to impose economic sanctions that would lead the country into a humanitarian crisis. In fact, in 1996, the United Nations granted a special permit so they could sell some oil and obtain food for the country. But, of course, it was all mafia corruption. And in the end, the poverty and the entire crisis that this country was suffering did not improve. And the question we all ask ourselves is, how did Saddam Hussein stay in power? Well, he had access to oil. He sold crude oil, let's say, illegally. And that's how he got resources to control the armed forces of this country, and to repress and extort, and obviously to instill terror, total censorship. And there was no one who, let's say, fought against him. But it wasn't until 2003 that the United States started a war that here in Iraq they consider was a United States invasion. While in the United States or in the West, they believe it was a war to remove Saddam Hussein from power because they assumed there were weapons of mass destruction and obviously they would be a threat to the whole world. The thing is that after entering Iraq and assassinating Saddam Hussein, they never ever found the supposed weapons of mass destruction. Following Iraq's liberation, the United States occupation lasted from 2003 to 2011. The Iraqi army and the Ba'ath political party were dissolved, but contrary to what everyone expected, tensions and chaos increased in the country. In 2006, a civil war broke out between the Sunnis and the Shiites, which are basically the two main branches of Islam. And they differ in that the Sunnis believe that the successor of Muhammad should be chosen from among his companions. And today, they are the majority in the Muslim world, with around 85%. While the Shiites believe that legitimate leadership should remain within the family of Muhammad, specifically with his cousin and son-in-law, Ali. They are the majority in countries like Iran, Iraq, Bahrain, and parts of Lebanon, but they are a global minority, making up 15% of Muslims. At that time, armed groups also emerged, including an early version of Al-Qaeda. In 2011, the United States government withdrew from Iraq, and tensions between the two main branches of Islam continued to rise. By 2014, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, a group of Sunni extremists that emerged from Al-Qaeda, launched a brutal attack, taking the city of Mosul, the second largest in Iraq, hostage and declaring a caliphate from Syria. Then it commits atrocities such as public executions, destruction of historical sites, and genocides like that of the Yazidis, a religious minority that lives mainly in the Sinjar region in northwest Iraq. Their religion is an ancient blend of Zoroastrianism, Islam, Christianity, and other beliefs that Islamic State of Iraq and Syria did not tolerate. They killed thousands of men, kidnapped thousands of women and girls, many of whom were enslaved and sold in markets, and destroyed entire villages, trying to erase their culture. By this time, an international coalition is formed again between the United States, Iran, the Kurds, and the Iraqi militias to finally overthrow the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria in Iraq in the year 2017. However, it is said that there are still cells of these militias in other countries. Since then, Iraq has been caught between the influences of foreign powers, which are Iran and the United States. Although it still faces challenges such as corruption, poverty, religious tensions, and the presence of militias, there are signs of stability, peace, and a youth that demands a fairer and more sovereign country, such as the case of Hussein, who dedicated himself to attracting tourists and showing them the other side of the country that we don't see on television. Here I am with Hussein, who is our guide here in Iraq, and I want to ask him some questions about everything that the war between the United States and this country entailed. Hussein, first of all, thank you for answering the questions and for guiding us through Iraq. It's an incredible country, but it's totally the opposite of what we in the West know or hear about this country. So first, I want to know about the conflict between the United States and Iraq. Why do Iraqis think it was an invasion instead of a war against Saddam Hussein?
Okay. Well, war is a very complicated and sensitive issue even now. A lot of Iraqis have different opinions about what happened in it. Some of them believe it was a good thing because we got rid of Saddam. He was a dictator and he really was a dictator. But what happened after 2023 was actually worse than what they expected, right? They anticipated that after liberation things would be amazing and they would have freedom. But what happened was the following decade of terrorist attacks, civil war. So it wasn't a good outcome, even if Saddam didn't like them. And then there are other people who, unfortunately, with Saddam's party, he liked them. Even now, some people like Saddam fully believe that the United States aims to destroy the Middle East, to take the oil, to take the resources. So, if you ask 10 Iraqis what they think, you'll get 10 different answers. But generally, I think overall, Iraqis really don't like him. We did the previous regime. Iraq is now developing in a good way. Iraq is stable. That many people don't want to repeat what happened in 2023 or before 2023.
And I was going to ask you, why is that? Because I just read a little that, yes, after 2023, then came the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria.
Al-Qaeda.
Yes, Al-Qaeda and another war. But nowadays, I'm traveling and I feel pretty safe in Iraq. and I'm making a special video about what life is like in Iraq nowadays. But can you say right now that the majority of the Iraqi population agrees with the liberation? I mean,
No, I wouldn't say that they really agree with the invasion itself as an action, but they are happy that it got rid of Saddam. Although we still don't trust the United States, we still believe that even the fact that they did this was not for liberation, it was not for freedom. They had their own political agenda they wanted to pursue.
of course.
Because the official narrative of weapons of mass destruction that Iraq had ties with Al-Qaeda, both of them turned out not to be true.
Yes, they never found the weapons or anything they were looking for.
Exactly. So we don't trust that the United States did this just for the people of Iraq, as Bush said. We don't believe in that, obviously. But I think the people of Iraq still have a happy life and are glad that at least we got out of the previous regime.
And I know you were very young, but maybe your parents or grandparents. Do you think that right now, in 2025, it's a better situation than in the early 21st century?
Yes, it's another sensitive topic, but I'll say something. In the year 2000 or 2021 or 2022, Iraq was under sanctions. Iraq was isolated because of the war, because of the invasion of Kuwait. Iraqis didn't have a good salary, a good average salary. I think now, even though we've gone through a very bad time, but personally, I lived in a post-2023 Iraq like now 100 times. I would choose to live in Iraq 100 times before 2023.
That's incredible. I want to explore this further in the next video. Thank you.
Let's talk about this more, of course.
Yes, let's talk about it. Thank you. We just arrived in Karbala, the city where the temple of Hussein ibn Ali is located, who is the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad and who was fundamental to the division between Shiites and Sunnis. We're going to the sanctuary right now. Cameras are not allowed, so I have to leave them and will take my phone. It's a very, very protected place. There's a lot of security. In fact, it's the center of pilgrimage in Islam, where the most people in the world attend. Every year, when 40 days have passed since the martyrdom of Hussein, an event called Arbaim is celebrated. And the faithful go there to pay tribute and worship Hussein, who was the grandson of Muhammad. Meanwhile, in Mecca, if you are wondering, is Mecca bigger? It's the most important because it's for the Sunnis and they are the majority of Muslims in the world. However, the Hajj, which is the event in Mecca, is attended by 2 or 3 million people every year. Therefore, the difference is huge. We are already entering the sanctuary. After a security check, for this place, it is mandatory for women to be completely covered. Only their faces can be uncovered, and men have to have their shoulders covered. They could have only their elbows exposed, like we see over there with Hussein, our guide. But women don't necessarily have to wear a black veil. It can be any color. The only thing is that, yes, they can't show any elbows, shoulders, or knees. Inside the temple, there is this hospital which is completely free and run by the Shiites. One of the things that has surprised me inside this sanctuary is that there are shops, restaurants, hotels, and apartments around. The whole mosque, so to speak, it's like a completely horizontal oval. And as you can see, on the sides, there are streets with people selling all kinds of things. They were telling me that, of course, they expand the security perimeter to protect the place. And so all the people who had houses, hotels, businesses here before this was built are now kind of trapped, so to speak, inside this security perimeter. And a house that used to cost around $50,000 can now be worth $5 or $10 million. Because the plan of the Shiites is to buy absolutely everything, tear it down, and be able to expand this sanctuary. Since they, just like the Catholic Church, are an organization that manages different projects like the hospital I just mentioned, and well, a lot of other things too. Look at what I mean. All these plots of land were bought to expand this place. Before going in, you have to grab a basket, take off your shoes, and then walk. And women enter through a different side than men, even though they can leave through the same place afterward. No, sorry, I made a mistake. The mosque is divided in two, with men going to one side and women going to the other. I thought since I saw women coming down the same hallway that when entering, they were together, but no. Indeed, well, and just like in practically all mosques, men have a separate place from women. Wow. Wow, what an impressive place. So massive. A place that literally overwhelms you with its beauty, with the amount of crystals it has all around. Impressive. It doesn't matter if you don't believe in this religion, this visit is very, very interesting. If you ever see Muslims with a mark on their forehead, it's because they place this on the floor, then kneel down and touch it with their forehead. So their forehead gets marked, so to speak, with this powder that is created. I don't know if you noticed, but they just left one, look. Look how interesting. When a person dies, they bring them here to bless them, and then they take them to the place where they will be buried. Because right inside there is buried Hussein, so to speak, the saint after whom this mosque is named, and the most sacred thing in this place. And right in front of the mosque we just visited, there's the one of Hussein's brother, Ibn Ali, which is exactly the same inside. But this one is a bit more important since he was a more significant figure in Islam. Look, it's impressive. There are many, a lot of people with professional cameras. Here I can show you 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've seen more than 30. And I think that's also one of the reasons why they don't let you bring your camera in, so they can sell you the photos inside. And honestly, these guys use some really high-end cameras. It's 12:41 at night, and we're heading back to the sanctuary because Tom wants to record some TikToks.
Yeah, some TikToks, but I also want to
experiment.
And yeah, I want to experiment, see what it's like inside when I'm alone. Because when I'm traveling with a group, it's a bit difficult for me. I don't know how to explain it. It's a bit, I feel like a guide. And now I'm going to experience it as a tourist and as a customer.
Tom had been in Iraq for several days before the whole group arrived. How did you feel being in Iraq by yourself for the first few days? And how many times have you been to Iraq?
It's my third time in Iraq, so it wasn't something new for me, but my first time in Iraq already felt kind of normal. Because in the media, in the news, people always say, you have to be careful because there was a war. And in the past, there were so many very, very bad things, but the past is the past. And now, right now, we're on the street. What time is it? Almost.
1 in the morning, 1 in the morning. It's crazy.
You can just walk down the street.
Everyone is super friendly and happy, and I think that's the most beautiful thing about this place. Because when you come to Iraq for the first time, you're a bit cautious, but then it's the people who make you feel welcome, because the first thing they're going to ask you is, where are you from? Do you need help? You don't need to pay for the juice, it's on me, you know? They make you feel that way. You're a god, a tourist is like a god here. I think that's
What makes this country super cool?
When was the first time you came to Iraq?
2018.
So since then, do you think Iraq is pretty calm, let's say?
Yes. Since, I think 2012, I think that's it. No, sorry. After the
Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Yes, 2017. And well, here you have the experience of a traveler who has come alone with people and obviously under his own responsibility. So I should be more cautious. And the truth is that the country welcomes you. People are so hospitable, you could say, or they're so kind that you can literally walk down the street at 1 in the morning. And I think this is a big part of Iraq's story. Because being able to show the reality of life in Iraq today is also a very important part for content creators, for everyone who comes to Iraq. I know that by creating drama, by stirring up controversy, you can get more views, you can make more money. But these countries, just like ours, need people to go and say that you can visit as a tourist. No, with this, I'm not saying that the country is fine, that the country is perfect. No, but that foreign people or even locals who live abroad. In fact, we met Iraqis who lived in the United States and came to visit their family. They can come and inject a little bit of money, turn the economy around, help those people who depend on tourism to survive, as happens a lot in Venezuela. Our guide had told us that this place was packed 24/7, and we didn't believe it. But look. And it's 1 in the morning. It's not even the weekend. Today is Wednesday. That's crazy. There's a man over there giving a speech. I'm not sure if it's a funeral because I already showed you before that when someone dies, they carry them around with the urns. It's like to bless the body before burying it. But here, you don't see any funeral, even though people are crying their eyes out. Obviously, I feel really bad about standing in front of them to record, but this moment is incredible. Good morning, travelers, from the city of Najaf. We came here this morning from Karbala, a drive of about 2 hours. And we arrived at the most sacred place in all of Iraq. We are at the mausoleum, at the shrine of Imam Ali, who was the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, whom I have already mentioned quite a bit throughout this video. Well, even though it's not the most crowded place, it's the most sacred in the whole country, and even within Islam, only after Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem, it's the most sacred place. My crazies. Leaving the Imam Ali Mosque, I'm going to conclude this journey through the history of Iraq. I was really surprised to have made this video. First of all, because I didn't know about the importance of these territories for the evolution of humanity as we know it today. And I did imagine it, but I didn't know it could be so much. The difference between what the news sells you and what the reality is in a country that has suffered so much. This won't be the last video about Iraq. In fact, it's going to be one of the ones you like the most. And it's by asking people what life is like here, what it's like to live in Iraq in 2025. So if you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe. Hit the notification button, the little bell, so YouTube lets you know. And please, leave a comment and a big like. I'll see you in a few days with a new video.